G'day guys, Soulgrasp here with TGN and the Dara Mactire Guild, bringing you not only an introduction to myself and my plans for uploading future content for the Dara show, but with this first upload I'm going to go through a brief Frost Death Knight PvE guide. Now, as many of you may know, most of the content on the Dara show at the moment is generally PvP related, so I thought to myself, what's a great way to be a part of this opportunity while still actually bringing something unique to the channel? And of course PvE. So with that in mind, let's jump right into the PvE guide. Now I'm going to keep this guide kind of brief as it is my first upload. However, in due time I will come out with additional guides to help you really maximize your single target and AoE DPS as a Frost Death Knight. However, for today we're going to tackle this in 3 different parts. The first part, I'm going to just have a look at specs, what specs are favourable, what specs aren't, what spec I'm running, some of the pros and cons of all the different specs that you can possibly go, as well as briefly touch on glyphs. Now glyphs are fairly straightforward, but we'll jump in on that as well. Then we're going to have a look at stat priorities, what stats are favourable, what stats aren't and why. And then finally I'm going to run you through some of the mods and macros I'm using. I'll show you my PvE macros, as well as give some suggestions for some good mods that I find quite useful. So first up we got the specs. Now as you can see I'm running dual wield with the Epidemic. Now generally there will be 4 variations you can see. That simply refers to whether you go dual wield or whether you go two-hander. And then within that choice you can either chase Epidemic or go for improved blood tap. Now the difference between dual wield and two-hander is one of them, dual wield namely, is performing a lot better DPS at the moment with 4.2. Two-hander is a lot less DPS, but it's a safer option in the sense of maintaining DPS. I say that purely because of the Might of the Frozen Waste. An additional ends up being like 45% chance to generate 10 runic power on your auto attacks. Now this evens out the dead spots that sometimes dual wield can see. You will be DPSing in your normal rotation as you go about your business. You might come across a situation where your runes will all be on cooldown, your Horn of Winter is on cooldown as well, and you don't quite have enough runic power to be able to do a frost strike. Now the downside with that is obviously you're stuck there doing nothing. That's where the Might of the Frozen Waste 10 runic power proc kind of comes in handy, because you'll see a lot less dead spots, and if you're really good at managing your runes, generally this won't happen that much with dual wield. However, two-hander is definitely like an easier managing the diseases and just managing your DPS in general. You'll always have something to do as two-hander. And then, as I mentioned, within that choice you can either chase Epidemic or improved blood tap. Now Epidemic adds the additional duration to your diseases. Keep in mind, Rhyme will pretty much always keep the Icy Touch disease, which is Frost Fever. It'll always keep Frost Fever up, so you won't really have to worry about that one. The main concern is Blood Plague. Now, on a 1 minute cycle with Epidemic, so the additional 12 seconds, you open up with Outbreak. 30 seconds later, you'll Plague Strike to reapply the Blood Plague disease. And then by the time you have the need to reapply it again, Outbreak is up. So on a 1 minute cycle, you'll only have to Plague Strike once. Now this naturally lends itself to more obliterates that you can do, and ultimately obliterate is your highest damage source at the moment, and closely followed by Frost Strike, but it just helps maintain more time doing the bigger hits that actually get your DPS, rather than spending runes and global cooldowns reapplying diseases. Without Epidemic, you actually have to Plague Strike twice on a 1 minute cycle. The upside to the reason why you might not want to chase down Epidemic is, as dual wield, as I mentioned, those dead spots that you can sometimes get, people favoured picking up improved blood tap to help even out those dead spots as dual wield. So essentially you're having fewer dead spots while still maintaining the higher DPS over two-hander, and that comes with being a 30-second cooldown blood tap. Obviously you can use that as you see fit to be able to even out those dead spots as I mentioned. So that runs through the spec itself, the choice between dual wield and two-hander, and then whether you go Epidemic and improved blood tap. As for the actual talents, obviously being dual wield, you pick up these 2 obvious dual wield talents. Everything else seems fairly straightforward. Some optional talents, namely Endless Winter. Now if you're not really interrupting, then that's 2 wasted points there. they can go elsewhere. And pretty much everything else is standard stuff. Another optional talent is Chillblains. Now, there's certain bosses in tier 11 that didn't want to have this, but in particular with Firelands, you look at Beth Talak, one of the first bosses that you'll encounter in there, and this snare really comes into great use on the Spiderling ads. So now we jump onto glyphs. Now the glyphs are fairly straightforward. Obviously you just got Frost Strike, Obliterate and Howling Blast. Nothing really out of the ordinary there. The rest you can kind of go for what you'd prefer to have. This is the one that I really stress. Now all through tier 11 and into Firelands there's a lot of raid wide magic damage, and that extra 2 seconds makes a big difference. I highly recommend the Glyph of Anti-Magic Shell. Now on to stat priorities. Now it is important to note that strength will always be your highest stat or best stat. However, I'm only going to focus on the secondary stats down here. So that's namely haste, mastery and crit. Now there's no difference between the stat priorities for dual wield and two-hander. So having a look, haste is our best stat. Now this will directly affect your rune speed. So as you can see, just shy of 78% melee haste runs you at 7.79 seconds on your recharge time. Naturally that means faster runes, means quicker DPS, stuff like that. It kind of makes sense. Also another thing to note about haste is obviously the faster your melee haste, the more uptime you will have on the Fallen Crusader buff. Closely following haste is mastery. Mastery will increase all frost damage by a flat percentage. As you can see, 15.57 runs you at 31% increase to frost damage. The more mastery you'll end up having, the closer you'll see the disparity between Frost Strike and Obliterate as a damage source. Probably looking at a couple of tiers, like a tier or two time, you'll probably see Frost Strike overtake Obliterate. And then now looking at crit chance. Now the crit value, or the value of crit as a secondary stat, is fairly diminished compared to the other two. And it's not because we don't like to crit, it's purely because of this talent here. Most of our crits, in fact nearly all of our crits, will come purely because of Killing Machine. It gives your auto attacks a chance to make your next Obliterate or Frost Strike a guaranteed crit. So that's why the value of crit is highly diminished with Frost. And lastly, we'll run through some macros and I'll show you a particular mod that I highly recommend for you guys. The first macro I want to share with you is a simple slash cast Death and Decay, but as you can see I've got a nice little exclamation mark in front of it. Now what this will do is, if I show you the normal Death and Decay, if you spam it, it'll toggle. This little targeting circle will toggle, and if I hit my macro though, I can spam it all I want and the targeting circle will stay up until I actually left click it down in its position. Now this is useful for anything that has or shares that similar targeting circle. We're talking Heroic Leap for warriors, Pet Freeze on frost mages, your Shadow Fury for destruction warlocks. Anything that has that similar targeting circle, you can simply put that exclamation mark in front of it and it will stop the toggle effect. The next macro I'll share with you guys is a simple Pillar of Frost. It will pop my engineering gloves, the 480 strength on a 1 minute cooldown. Works out very well because Blood Tap and Pillar of Frost are also on a 1 minute cooldown. So the Blood Tap's in there to make sure that irregardless of what state my current runes are in, I'll always be able to get my Pillar of Frost off on cooldown. And finally, the last macro I'll share with you guys is a mouse over macro for our new battle res, which is Raise Ally. Now it's just a slash cast square bracket target equals mouse over comma help, close brackets raise ally double dot in square brackets again help raise ally. Now what this will do is it will prioritize your mouse over target over your current target. So let's just pretend that these two dummies here are friendlies. If I target this one on the left but mouse over the one on the right, hit my macro, it'll try and battle res this dude first. If I'm not mousing over anyone, then it will try and battle res my current target. Now the reason that this is useful is, let's just pretend I'm on a boss right now, as you can see whacking away, and on my raid frames someone dies. I can actually mouse over them on the raid frames, hit my macro while still targeting the boss, and then once he's been battle resed up, continue on my merry way And now I want to share this particular mod with you guys. It's called Reforginator and it's absolutely amazing. I highly recommend it. It has PvP utility as well, but I don't really use it for PvP that much. Mainly the raiding is where I'm concerned with it. Now, to give you an idea of the interface, if I just pretend I want to reforge for blood, as you can see, it'll go through each individual item and it will recommend what you should do with that item to make sure you're maximizing your efficiency with whatever class or spec you're running. So it's not just ZKs, it's for mages, warriors, any class, any spec whatsoever. And what it will do is it will make sure that you're always at your caps that you need. So I'm at my hit cap, I'm at my expertise cap, and then it will maximize the most amount of your secondary stats that you will want. And as you can see, each individual item, it will say expertise, reforge it to mastery, hit, reforge to mastery, things like that. And if it recommends that you reset it, it'll simply say reset. And then when everything's all said and done, it'll just simply say no suggestions for your gear. It's got it all the way you want it. So I highly recommend that, sorry. And it pretty much will just takes the entire guesswork out of what you should reforge to what, and just makes your life a whole lot easier, really. So yeah, this has been Soulgrasp with TGN and Dara Mactire, bringing you a brief Frost PvE guide. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and post in the comments what you liked, what you didn't like, perhaps some suggestions for future content. And also, if you're keen to check out my solo channel where I've just got some random PvP clips and stuff like that, you can have a look in the top right hand corner. There'll be a link up there. So thank you very much for watching and catch you guys next time.